The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Leng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are taking a look at Return to the Circle Undone, the next product in the Return to line. FFG dropped their preview of this expansion on Thursday after a lot of teasing on Twitter of the various tarot card images that we will talk a little bit more about in a minute. But it's been really difficult for me to get excited about this particular product because as someone who plays predominantly solo, the Circle Undone campaign is easily my least favorite. Man, disaster is a pretty strong word, but man, this campaign just rubs me the wrong way. While I did enjoy the two scenarios in the Deluxe expansion, The Witching Hour and At Death's Doorstep, and the secret name has grown on me, particularly playing it in standalone. The Wages of Sin, Union and Disillusion, In the Clutches of Chaos, and Before the Black Throne have really rubbed me the wrong way, and they are very difficult to beat in solo. I had a chance recently to sit down and really play Before the Black Throne quite a bit, and man, what a random mess that scenario is, especially when you're playing solo. You've already got a very large map to cover, and then you've got your deck being taken away by empty space. You've got random locations coming into the Cosmos deck. The locations you need to find are randomly placed. And more often than not, that scenario just feels like it's a coin flip at the end. And that's really not what I enjoy about the Arkham Horror LCG. So while I am hopeful that the Return to product will fix some of the problems with the scenarios in the Circle Undone for a solo player like myself, I'm not hopeful. There is only so much that these Return to boxes can do. And so we shall see. But it's going to be tough, and we do get a peek at some of those scenarios here in this preview. So we'll take a look at that. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these previews. If you'd like to support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Without further ado, let's get started. FFG dropped their preview of Return to the Circle Undone on Thursday. And this product contains many of the same things that we have come to know and love about the Return to products. There are new scenario cards and encounter sets that will change up each of the scenarios in the campaign. That sometimes they make them a little more difficult. Sometimes they smooth out some of the bumps that were missed in playtesting. There will be some new player cards in this particular Return to product. Most of the Return to products, I guess all of them up to this point, have only included upgrades for player cards and the occasional new weakness. This will actually include some new player cards with the tarot theme that was introduced in the Circle Undone, but not developed to a great extent, certainly not compared to how Bless and Curse tokens have been developed in the Innsmouth Conspiracy. So we can see here in the card fan, we are getting upgrades for versions of Sign Magic, Trial by Fire, and Well Connected. Trial by Fire is a card I would definitely play. Sign Magic is not one that has made the cut in my Mystic decks, so I am be curious to see what the upgrade does and whether it really will make the cut, especially considering some of the new tarot cards in this set that will do something similar to what Sign Magic was already doing. Of course, there are card dividers to help you sort and store your collection. I have a whole box full of these card dividers. I am not much for sorting my cards, so the card dividers, while nice, don't get used. And the special feature, I guess, of the Return to box here is a full-size deck of 22 tarot cards that you'll be able to use to enhance your scenario. I guess your mileage with these will vary. If you enjoy playing some of the variants of the Arkham Horror LCG, then these tarot cards might be right up your alley. The only variant of the Arkham Horror LCG that I play with any sort of frequency is the Ultimatum of Chaos, where you play with a randomly generated deck. I tend not to play with a lot of the other ultimatums, and so I'm not entirely sure if I'll be using the tarot card deck. I guess it depends a lot on how it is incorporated into the scenarios, and we'll talk a little bit more about that once we take a look at the tarot cards. Some of them are extremely powerful and will certainly give you an advantage if you're playing, just as their reverse. The reverse of the cards can be quite detrimental to your game. So if you want to make things a little bit easier or a little bit more difficult, the tarot cards will give you an opportunity to do that. The preview article doesn't actually spoil a whole bunch of new cards, which is kind of unusual for FFG these days. The preview articles we've seen for some of the Mythos packs have spoiled almost half the cards in the pack. We only get a smattering here. The first is Senator Nathaniel Rhodes, adept politician. He will be appearing he is a new enemy for At Death's Doorstep, another member of the Silver Twilight Lodge. He has 1 fight, 2 health, and 1 evade. Humanoid cultist Silver Twilight. He is aloof, and he has the action Parlay Test Willpower 2 to speak with the Senator. If you succeed, either take control of one of his clues or flip 1 doom on him to his clue side. And if you fail, flip 1 of his clues to its doom side, and he will hit you for 1 horror. Now, if you remember, the At Death's Doorstep, the Silver Twilight enemies cannot be attacked at the beginning of the scenario. And then once you advance to the spectral portion, the members of the Silver Twilight Lodge will attempt to flee the lodge before they get killed by the Spectral Watcher. Now, there are cards, however, in the encounter sets, such as Mysteries of the Lodge, that will add doom to those Silver Twilight Lodge members, which will, of course, make the agenda advance that much quicker. Now, Nathaniel here is interesting in that if you do end up placing doom on him, and we don't know if there are new encounter cards, I presume there's probably new encounter cards that will add doom to these Silver Twilight enemies. If you do parlay with him, you can flip clues. You can flip the doom to its clue side or take control of the clues. Now, I don't know how feasible that's going to be in solo for me. It can be quite... that scenario is you need to be moving quite quickly to grab all the clues that you need and then escape. So we'll see. But it is nice to have the option that if you happen to place doom on this guy with a card like Mysteries of the Lodge, that you can parlay with him and then flip it over to his... flip that doom over to its clue side. And then if you are short clues or you need other clues, then you can grab them off this guy. Now, a Willpower 2 parlay test is not too difficult. Certainly not as difficult as it could be. And of course, things like Fine Clothes can help you reduce that to a 0 willpower skill test, all but guaranteeing success, unless, of course, you draw the auto fail. So if you are playing a high willpower investigator, which is often recommended in the Circle Undone due to its the sheer number of willpower treacheries in the encounter sets, having an investigator with high willpower is a big boon in this particular campaign. So passing a 2 willpower parlay test shouldn't be too difficult. So this guy will give you a chance to grab some clues if necessary. One of the other cards that was spoiled is the Nikon Steed. This one is for Before the Black Throne, which I talked about a little bit earlier. The Nikon Steed is interesting in that it offers investigators a way to traverse empty space in Before the Black Throne. As you may remember, part of your deck becomes those empty space locations, which you cannot travel through by typical move actions. You need to gather clues and then spend those clues in order to draw cards from the Cosmos deck. And if you, depending on how many clues you spend, that's how many cards you get to look at. And then from those cards, you get to pick a location, which is usually placed above, below, or to the left or right of the location. So that by placing those locations, that's how you move. Now, this guy, he lets you move through empty space up to, I think it looks like 3 times, because after you enter empty space with the Nikon Steed, it will take 1 direct damage. It would be kind of nice to be able to heal this guy and use him repeatedly. Unfortunately, he is not an ally, so any of those cards that heal allies and whatnot, you cannot, you won't be able to do that. I can't really think of a way offhand to get more than three uses out of this guy. Now, it is unclear from the preview article how and when investigators will procure this Nikon Steed. Perhaps it is a reward for completing In the Clutches of Chaos, the scenario that before the Black Throne, or perhaps you are granted this guy at the beginning of Before the Black Throne if you have achieved certain objectives throughout the campaign. It's hard to say. We don't know. Now, the ability to move through empty space is very handy. It would come in very, very handy. And of course, once the Nikon Steed dies, you get to remove it from the game and place and move to the nearest revealed location. So as long as you can get close to the location you want to get to, the Nikon Steed will get you part of the way there, and then he'll die and you get to move. It's helpful, but having played a lot of Before the Black Throne recently, this card, while it will help, I don't think it addresses my 3 biggest issues with that scenario, that namely being the random nature of the empty space, which can basically tear your strategy apart before you even draw a card. If you happen to lose the wrong cards to empty space, your strategy may or may not work right off the bat. Then you're drawing the random locations from the Cosmos deck. So I found playing Before the Black Throne, if you were only spending 1 clue, it generally wasn't worth it, because you'd end up drawing a location that you just couldn't use. So you needed to spend 2 or even 3 clues at a time in order to draw a card that might work for you. And then, of course, there is the key locations that you need to reach, those namely being the Hideous Palace, Court of the Great Old One, and the Black Throne. And those are placed at random. Hideous Palace, you've got basically there are 2 locations, so you need to pick one of the 2, and or Hideous Palace will be one of the 2. Court of the Great Old Ones is one of 3 locations, and Before the Black Throne is one of 4. In my experience, unfortunately, by the time, unless you get extremely lucky with your picks, especially on Act 2 when you're looking for the Court of the Great Old Ones, you may simply not have time to check many of the locations during Act 3. So unless you get lucky and you hit the Black Throne right off the bat, the doom ramps up so rapidly in this particular scenario that it is highly unlikely that you will get a second bite at the apple and be able to sort of get yourself in a position where you can check a second location. And even then, I mean, you've got potentially 4 locations to go through. And if it happens to be the 4th location that you pick, you're out of luck. So I found that that scenario toward the end, it can really feel like a coin flip. And while all scenarios have an element of luck in them, because the cards are drawn at random from the encounter deck, and there are random draws from the chaos bag. I prefer my scenarios to be a little bit more skill-based, where I can look back and say, I won this scenario based on the choices I made and my skillful play, not, hey, I picked the right location, I had a 1 in 4 shot, I picked this one because it happened to be closest, and I won, or I lost. And so that's... I don't think this guy really addresses that problem, but who knows? Maybe there are some other cards in the Return to box that will fix those issues. We also have a new story asset, Aaron McCoy. I'm not too sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Devoted Enchantress, she is a 2-cost asset with 2 willpower skill icons, the ally and witch traits. She uses 3 secrets. You get +1 willpower with Aaron in play, which is, of course, very helpful in the entire Circle Undone campaign because it is so willpower heavy. And as a response, when you draw a non-weakness curse or power treachery, you may spend a secret and exhaust Aaron McCoy to cancel that card's revelation effect. She takes up an ally slot and has 2 health and 2 sanity. Now, Aaron is the red-haired witch that investigators encounter during the resolution of the witching hour. There is an argument between her and Annette about the investigators' interference. So I presume that that is where you will be given a chance to recruit Aaron to your side, although it is unclear from the preview article how and when you will acquire Aaron. Now, Aaron's a pretty decent ally. She's cheap at 2 resources. That's a big plus. She's got 2 willpower skill icons, which is always helpful, especially in a campaign that has so many willpower skill tests that you need to take, both on treacheries that you draw from the encounter deck and all of those treacheries that end up in your play area, in your threat area, over the course of some of those scenarios. The +1 willpower, of course, is very nice, and 2 health and 2 sanity makes her pretty resilient to cards like Sentries of Secrets that will damage allies. So she's not going to go down to that particular treachery anytime soon. Now, she does interplay with 3 secrets, which limits her ability to cancel cards, but you do have the option to add more secrets if you happen to be playing a Seeker or off-class Seeker. So you can play cards like Enraptured and the name escapes me. It was on the tip of my tongue and then I lost it. But the Seekers have several or many ways, like Eldritch Sophist and whatnot, to add more secrets. So if you find Aaron's cancellation particularly good, you have ways of boosting that. Now, I took a quick look at the treacheries that she can cancel in just the deluxe box itself, and she can cancel things like Watcher's Grasp, which of course moves the Watcher, and he has the potential to attack you, so that's pretty good. Demonic Piping, that's a big one. Particularly in Before the Black Throne, the ability to cancel that treachery would come in extremely handy in the ultimate scenario of the campaign. Diabolic Voices, that is a particularly mean treachery that gets worse the more copies that are in the discard pile. So the ability to cancel that one is pretty big. And then Evil's Past enters your threat area. You will take some horror if it pops, but you need to run the encounter deck out of cards in order to do that. And so the only time that is really I've found to be much of a threat is in the Witching Hour, and you're probably playing that before you have Aaron on your side. So chances are that is not too bad. And of course, Sentries of Secrets. So if you're worried about Aaron being killed by this treachery, she has a way of easily canceling it. So some pretty good treacheries on that list. Demonic Piping, Diabolic Voices, and Sentries of Secrets for sure. I would not hesitate to cancel if I had the chance with Aaron. So a pretty solid ally for the as a story asset. She does take up the ally slot. So if you have another ally that is key to your strategy, you may well want to pick up Charisma at some point along the way, so you can have to bring Aaron along for the ride. Now, we haven't seen, perhaps there are more allies that we will encounter throughout the in the Return To box. It seems like the Return To box could incorporate quite a few. I mean, depending on who you side with in the campaign, there's the Witches as well as the Silver Twilight Lodge. So having a Silver Twilight Lodge ally seems like a possibility. So I would, so perhaps I don't think we'll have the same number of allies like we did in the Dunwich Legacy, where you can basically pick up a fistful of allies along the way. But having Aaron along would be nice. Now, the other feature of this deluxe box, not deluxe box, of this Return to box is going to be they are giving some support to the tarot card theme that was introduced in the deluxe expansion. The tarot cards were certainly not developed as much as, say, the Bless or Curse mechanic in the Innsmouth Conspiracy. The deluxe box contains one for each class, as well as a neutral tarot card, and then the Tower Weakness, and then I think Anna Kaslau, the ally from the In the Clutches of Chaos, was the only one of the, might be the only other card in the whole cycle that really dealt with tarot cards. And so the tarot card theme really didn't take off. I went looking for a deck that would be sort of representative of the tarot card theme, and I came up with this one, the Painter of Eternity, that was over on Arkham DB, created by Rancord. Now the tarot card mechanics, because they're better off when you draw them in your opening hand. A lot of attempts to build a viable tarot card deck were focused on Safina Rousseau for obvious reasons, because Safina starts the game by drawing 13 cards. So if you're able to pack your deck with tarot cards, your odds of seeing them in your opening hand are a lot greater with an investigator like Safina. So this particular deck uses one copy of Anna Kaslau, who costs 4 experience points. That is that's a lot of experience points for an ally. She does give you 2 additional slots, but she only has 1 health and 1 sanity, so she's pretty fragile as allies go. And it includes 2 Four of Cups, which of course would boost Safina's willpower, and 1 copy of the Moon 18 that would boost her agility. So this is the sort of deck, this was the most popular tarot card deck that I could find on Arkham DB. And but because I think Anna is A1, she's super expensive and fragile, and really her ability is so front loaded. Like, unless you get Anna in your opening hand, and then you can get some tarot cards down. I found the tarot cards, I mean, they're fantastic if you can draw them in your opening hand, but at 3 resources a pop, they can be a little bit pricey to put in play the hard way. So I haven't played a tarot card deck myself, so I'm in really no position to comment, but on their effectiveness or the effectiveness of this deck. But it seems like it would be, there's just really not enough there to really build a really solid deck around. I think it's interesting, and I think it will be more interesting when we take a look at some of these new tarot cards that we're getting in this product. But I think the real sort of lack of decks on Arkham DB speaks to, the tarot card theme just not being quite what it could be. But we are getting some new cards that will focus on tarot cards. The first of those being Moon Pendant. It is a 2-cost asset that costs 2 experience points. It's non-unique, so you can have 2 of these in play. It has the item and charm traits. You have 1 additional tarot slot. Each non-weakness tarot asset in your hand or committed to a skill test gains 2 wild skill icons. And then as a response, when the game begins, if Moon Pendant is in your opening hand, put it into play, and it takes up an accessory slot. So one of the biggest issues, of course, with the tarot cards that we have is that they have no skill icons. Moon Pendant fixes that problem, giving them 2 wild skill icons. So it turns every tarot card in your hand that you are committing to a skill test to 2 wild skill icons. That's pretty damn good. And then you could use the Moon Pendant to either supplement or complement Anna Kaslow from In the Clutches of Chaos. And I believe if you have, my note here says that you can have 4 tarot slots. I think you can actually have 5 because the Moon Pendant is not unique. So you could have Anna, she gives you 2, you get 1 naturally, and then you could get 2 more thanks to the Moon Pendant. Of course, you'd need to play something like Relic Hunter in order to get that extra accessory slot, so you could play 2 Moon Pendants. But 5 tarot card slots, and with the new tarot cards, of course, you could certainly find some very tempting targets to fill them. I mentioned Safina being a good choice to build a tarot card deck around because of her large opening hand. The other investigator who I think would probably make a good choice is Lola Hayes, because she is the only investigator who can play all of the tarot cards, because they are level 3 cards, and of course she can take cards from any class, so she could mix and match tarot cards from a variety of sources at a variety of classes, and then of course pack Moon Pendant and Anna and have a lot of tarot slots to jam those cards into. I didn't really see a lot of Lola Hayes tarot decks on Arkham DB, but again, there weren't that many decks to choose from. So perhaps we will see, once Moon Pendant is released, perhaps we'll see more players experimenting with Safina and Lola as a potential tarot card deck investigators. Now, we are also getting some new tarot cards, which are very exciting. It looks like we're going to be getting 1 for each class. These are slightly different than the ones in the Circle Undone Deluxe box. The ones in the Circle Undone, they cost 1 experience point, and these cost 3, so these are a little bit more powerful and a little bit more expensive. They are also non-unique, though, so you can have multiple of these in play. So the first, they spoiled 2 of them. The first is the Star. That would be 17. You have been chosen, 3-cost asset that costs 3 experience points. Tarot card. Each asset you control with health gets +1 health. Each asset you control with sanity gets +1 sanity. And of course, the reaction when the big game begins. If the Star 17 is in your opening hand, put it into play. Now, this is pretty, could be potentially quite powerful if you were to build around it. I was thinking theoretically of a Leo Anderson deck. Leo can, I believe, have 5 allies in play. And then if you were able to purchase 2 copies of the Star 17, drop those, and you'd probably need either Anna or the Moon Pendant to get an extra tarot slot. But if you can get all that down, you'd have 5 allies in play with +2 health and +2 sanity each. So that's 10 health and 10 sanity before you even talked about the health and sanity that each of those allies has natively. I don't think you need that much soak, but it's possible. You could certainly build a deck that way. Perhaps somebody like his name, man, the names are escaping me today. Our favorite cop who plays well with allies. Like if you had enough of those allies and the Star down, man, you'd have soak for days. So that's a possibility. Boost, and of course a lot of those allies have abilities that spend health and sanity to activate. So if you've got a couple copies of the Star down, you're just getting more and more uses of those abilities. Like a Beat Cop, you're getting an extra damage out of that. A couple copies of Star down, you're getting 2 extra damage, plus extra sanity to soak, which is of course always good for a Guardian. So a lot of possibilities here with the Star. to play around with. So a very, very intriguing card there for Guardians. Now, Mystics get their own tarot card. This is the Hierophant 5. Your True Master awaits. 3-cost asset. Again, 3 experience points. Tarot. You have 1 additional arcane slot. But here is the fascinating part. Your arcane slots can be used to hold cards that take up accessory slots and vice versa. And of course, when the game begins, the Hierophant 5 is in, if it is in your opening hand, put it into play. So I talked a little bit about sign magic at the beginning that gives you an arcane slot, or you can convert your hand slots into arcane slots. The Hierophant lets you convert your arcane slots into accessory slots and vice versa. So you play the 1 copy of the Hierophant down. You now have 3 arcane slots and 1 accessory slot, or 4 accessory slots, or 4 arcane slots, depending on how you want to build your deck. That is, man, coming up with extra arcane slots is not always easy in this game. A lot of the cards that give you extra arcane slots are not particularly, don't see a ton of play. So the ability to pick up this tarot card for 3 experience points, drop it on the table at the beginning of the game, and suddenly you've got 4 arcane slots and or 4 accessory slots to play around with. Man, oh man, that gives Mystics a lot of deck building options to play around with. Now, Mystics have a lot of great accessories that they can play around with. I mean, the core set, you've got Holy Rosary. There's the Jewel of Aureolus, if I can pronounce that properly, that helps them draw cards. I mean, arcane slots, they live and die by their arcane slots. And we've received, in the past couple cycles, we have received a ton of cards that take up arcane slots. So having a tarot card available that lets you play around with the accessory and or arcane slots in Investigator is pretty fantastic. Now, these are just the Guardian and Seeker ones, or Guardian and Mystic ones, sorry. Presumably, we're getting 1 for each class, and if those are as good as these ones, man, oh man, that is going to be lead to some exciting deck building going forward. Who knows, perhaps there is even a neutral one in the pack that would really spice things up. Again, barring the introduction of a tarot-centric Investigator down the line, which seems unlikely given that the tarot cards are restricted to the Circle Undone cycle, Lola Hayes is the only one who can purchase any of the tarot cards because they are either level 1 or 3. So perhaps with the introduction of more powerful tarot cards, the Lola tarot deck will become a thing that will be a force to be reckoned with. But we'll see. I mean, it is fairly easy to disrupt a deck like this because, I mean, Anna only has 1 health and 1 sanity, so she's quite vulnerable. If you lose her, you're losing 2 tarot slots. Things like the Moon Pendant, which takes up an accessory slot or an arcane slot now, if you wish. That can be, I mean, Crypt Chill can rip through that pretty easily. So it is vulnerable to disruption, but man, I'd be very interested to see what players can do with these new tarot cards. I know Matt Ostrovik is the Lola expert out there, and who knows, maybe he'll come up with some interesting builds with these new tarot cards out of Lola. So just based on these 2 cards, man, looking forward to seeing what the other 3 or 4, if we get a neutral one, will do for Investigators. Now, speaking of tarot cards, we are also getting the tarot deck. The 22-card full-size tarot deck that can be used as an optional mechanic in any scenario. Now, according to the preview article, there will be multiple ways to perform card readings that can swing a scenario in your favor or turn it against you, depending whether you want it a little bit easier or a little bit more difficult. Now, some of these effects are very, very powerful. And if you're looking to make your game slightly easier, then some of these tarot cards would be quite good. Or if you're an expert and you want a bigger challenge, then some of the reverse sides of these tarot cards will make the game that much more difficult for you. Now, I'm personally, the tarot deck, it's nice. I think it's cool. The art is fantastic. I mean, the art on these cards is beautiful. Whether I'm going to use it, well, that depends a lot on the multiple ways of performing card readings. If the card readings are interesting enough, and maybe it's not so much you just get one tarot card, but maybe you get a couple, depending on how the reading goes. Maybe some benefits and some good and some bad mixed up. Maybe that would be interesting, but I tend to play mostly vanilla unless I'm playing Ultimatum of Chaos, so we'll see. But they did spoil, actually, they spoiled more of these tarot cards than they did other cards in the set. Starting off with the Fool, number 0. If you get the good Fool, each investigator not defeated during this game earns +2 experience points during its resolution. That's pretty sweet. I'll always take extra experience points if I can get it. And not being defeated is that's a pretty straightforward goal and not too difficult to achieve most of the time. However, if you get the Fool reversed, each investigator defeated during this game earns -2 experience during its resolution. This, of course, is nobody wants to lose experience, but this could be potentially quite bad. I tend not to like the combination of losing a scenario and then losing experience on top of that, because I feel like it has a snowball effect. And that you're sort of kicking an investigator when they're down. They've already taken probably a mental or physical trauma. They've already probably suffered some sort of debilitating effect from the resolution of the scenario. And then you tack on -2 experience points on top of that. That's a lot to, you're really kicking an investigator while they're down at that point. And I always I guess I sort of feel like, if investigators do badly at a scenario, that they should receive maybe some experience points. So at least they did badly in this one. Okay, they've taken a trauma. Things are bad. They're probably going to suffer something terrible down the line. But if you feed them a couple of experience points, perhaps that will give them an opportunity to maybe pick up that key card they need to enhance their strategy. And they'll be able to do better in future scenarios. It's still not going to be easy, but at least they're not suffering the negative consequences of failure and then losing more experience points on top of it. So, and being unable to basically compete at that point. So, but again, the tarot deck is completely optional, so players who enjoy this sort of thing, they'll eat this up. Others will perhaps the tarot deck will end up in my my box of the cards used to sort the decks too. So we'll see. There are a few others. The Empress, of course, is the art that they used in the preview article. The Empress 3 is during the first agility skill test each investigator performs each round. They get +1 agility. That's pretty strong for since it affects it affects each investigator, and it affects each test, the first test they do each round. So if you're playing in an evasion-based investigator, getting that +1 agility on the first test each round is the first agility test, not the first test, mind you, the first agility skill test. So even if you take that test action 3, you're still going to get this benefit. That's pretty good. I assume that based on this templating, we'll see +1 willpower, +1 combat, intellect, etc., etc. So we'll see cards that do all of those things. So it's pretty good. I mean, I can't complain. You're not going to. The intellect one is probably the strongest since it's the one that's the easiest to use. I don't see myself triggering the Empress all that often, so I'd be kind of like, well, if I pulled this one as my card, I'd be like, well, it's not really going to be used all that much, while I assume there's one that during the first intellect skill test, each investigator performs each round, they get +1. Intellect would be considerably stronger since investigation plays a huge role. Although the Empress could be good in Forgotten Age for all those, since it's the first agility test of the round, that would play during the Mythos phase. So you could use these to boost up against a lot of those. I mean, Snakebite is the one that comes to mind, but there are many others in the Forgotten Age campaign that key off of agility skill tests. So same with the willpower one. That would be obviously most useful during the Mythos phase, unless of course you're playing a Mystic. So it's a good ability. Now, the reverse of the Empress is during the first agility test, each investigator performs each round. They get -1 agility. Again, unless you're playing a scenario that requires a lot of evasion, -1 agility isn't going to be too bad during most games. Potentially bad during the Mythos phase if you get if you're playing an agility treachery heavy campaign like the Forgotten Age. And of course we'll see, I assume again, we're seeing one of these cards for each of the skills. So man, if you get the one, whichever it is, that you get -1 intellect on the first intellect skill test each turn, that could be that's going to slow you down if you are investigating, and especially if I've been playing a lot of Rita Young this weekend, and she's only got 2 intellect, so dealing with -1 intellect on each skill test each round would be bad news. So interesting cards for each of the skills. We also have the Lovers. This art, I believe, was featured in Union and Disillusion initially, if I remember correctly. The Lovers 6, when the game begins, each investigator searches their deck for an ally asset, adds it to their hand, and shuffles their deck. I mean, wow, that's fantastic. If you happen to get this card, so many decks that are built these days focus on, the ally slot is the most competitive in the game, and allies play a huge role in a lot of strategies. So the ability to search your deck for the ally of your choice and put it in your opening hand that's incredible. Vice versa, if you get the Lovers reversed, when this game begins, each investigator searches their deck for an ally asset, removes it from the game, and shuffles their deck. Now, this is bad, considering you probably only have 2 copies of any given ally in the deck. You're going to lose one of those allies. That's bad, but not. You still have the odds of drawing the other one in your opening hand. So it's not immediately fatal, but it is, considering how powerful the front side is on this, the reverse is, it's rough, but it's not necessarily a death sentence. I think the thing to remember about the Arkham Horror LCG is that while you may think a lot of the cards in your deck are critical to your success, there's a lot of scenarios I've beaten without seeing the card that I thought, I can't possibly beat this scenario without card X. And then somehow I end up beating it. So I think it's more helpful to see all of the cards in your deck as resources, and rarely is one of the cards the thing that is going to win you the scenario. And so losing an ally, yeah, it would suck, but you still have a chance. And who knows, you might have played that scenario, never seen that ally the whole game, and you still win. So an interesting gives you some stuff to think about, the Lovers here. And finally, we conclude with Strength 8. When the game begins, each investigator may play an asset from their hand at -2 cost. Wow. if you end up with that, I don't know if you're going to have whether those the readings, so-called readings, will allow you to draw multiple cards, but theoretically you could end up with the lovers and strength and get to grab an ally and play it. Or if you just happen to have an ally in your hand, in your opening hand, you get to play it for -2. Or if you've got your gun, you've got any of those assets that you need, a gun, an ally, a spell, any of that stuff, you get to start the game with it in play, and you get to pay less for it. I mean, that's awesome. On the flip side, the strength reversed is during the first round of the game, each investigator cannot play assets. Now, again, the front side of this one is very powerful. The ability to play an asset at -2 right off the bat is amazing. Not being able to play any assets, that's rough, but again, it's not necessarily going to kill you outright. I guess it depends a lot on what you draw from the what your role is in the game, what your role in is what you're strong in. So if you just need to investigate, you can probably, if you're playing somebody like Harvey and you've got 5 intellect and you're just planning to investigate anyway, this card does nothing. Like, he can still investigate perfectly well without playing any assets, even a magnifying glass or a Solano fragments or something like that. No big deal. He can do without it for a turn. But if you're playing and you need a weapon and of course you draw an enemy, then yeah, things get a little dicey. So this one's a little bit harder to judge, but I guess it depends on what you draw. Now, the thing that just occurred to me is that I'm looking at this mainly from a solo perspective because that's pretty much all I play. But this could get pretty interesting in multiplayer as well if you're playing with this tarot deck. Depending on how the cards are read, you could end up with several of these cards in play, one for each, presumably one for each investigator sitting at the table. So you could have 4 of these effects going off at once, and that would lead to some pretty interesting tables or games, depending on how these cards combine. And with 22 cards, it's a lot of different combinations to play with. So it could be pretty interesting to play multiplayer with these tarot card decks, with this tarot card deck, depending on how it all shakes down. So I'm glad it exists. I think it's kind of cool. Whether I'll use it or not, I don't know. I tend not to mix up my games too much. Generally because I'm just testing decks and I just want to see how cards perform without... I want to see how they work in sort of their natural environment. So adding in a bunch of these special abilities or tricks or stuff like that isn't really what I'm into. But there are certainly players out there who will just eat this stuff up, and I'm glad that it exists for them. That's going to do it for my preview of Return to the Circle Undone. Again, man, it took me a couple days to work up the enthusiasm to record this video. The Circle Undone campaign really was, I think, probably my low point with the Arkham Horror LCG. I know that I think by the time we were sort of in mid-campaign, I really wasn't enjoying the Arkham Horror LCG, and that was tough because I really love this game, but when you're just not inspired to play the scenarios, and they're really not geared towards solo play, that can get really frustrating, especially if solo is your main game. I know for a lot of people, they play multiplayer, and they probably thought the Circle Undone is a fantastic campaign. I know there are lots of people out there who love this campaign, but for me, it was just like, well, this isn't good. And I have built decks that can beat a lot of these scenarios solo. I built a deck that can beat Union and Dissolution. I've built a deck that can beat Before the Black Throne. But to play it as a campaign, that's a little more difficult, because while the deck I built to beat Union and Disillusion is good at beating Union and Disillusion, it may not be very good at pretty much any of the other scenarios. So, and the way the campaign structure works and experience points and whatnot, you just can't rebuild a deck between scenarios that easily. So, yeah, so I'm hopeful that this box will fix some of those scenarios, or maybe tweak them enough that it makes it a little easier for the solo players out there to be able to play the campaign and enjoy it. But I mean, even when I played it in multiplayer, I played this with Nate and Vase, and the name escapes me. Big Stupid Grin. We played this for the Iron Man for Arkham Knights, and even then I didn't really enjoy this campaign in multiplayer. It's probably the closest I've come to getting really salty on stream in the middle of Wages of Sin. And so I think by the end of that campaign, a lot of us were just like, we don't like this campaign. And so I'm really hoping that this box will be able to fix that, and people will be able to give it another try and enjoy it. And for a solo player like myself, maybe it'll breathe some new life into those scenarios for me. So, of course, we're going to get some new player cards. Those are always exciting, although a lot of the player cards that we receive in these Return to boxes are upgrades for cards that didn't really see a lot of play in the first place. So I'll hold my judgment there. We are getting some new tarot cards. That's exciting. There are a couple of investigators who can certainly build decks around those. And then, of course, the tarot deck is kind of cool. Could be fascinating in multiplayer with all those tarot cards floating around and all those different effects. So all in all, this is coming out in the summer. So it sounds like we're going to have a bit of a wait between the end of the Innsmouth Conspiracy campaign, which looks like it'll wrap up in April with Into the Maelstrom. And then we're going to have a couple months before Return 2 drops. Now, there have been rumors of a revised core set coming out in the fall. And when we talked to MJ Newman on Great Old Ones Gaming, he couldn't say anything about the next deluxe expansion. So at this point, I am not expecting the next deluxe expansion to come out until after this revised core set, if that is in fact true. And it seems by some of the advertising we've seen on other sites that it is in fact real. So I don't expect a new deluxe expansion until probably October, maybe. So we'll see. So Return to the Circle Undone, unless they have some other products in the system that we don't know about, is the one to look forward to after the Innsmouth Conspiracy. And of course, I'll be back. Man, I still have to play Return to the Path to Carcosa and Return to the Forgotten Age, so I better get playing. And of course, I need to finish the Innsmouth Conspiracy, which I'll be working at this week. So I hope you enjoyed this preview, and looking forward to more Arkham Horror content. And I hope that you will stay tuned for more great Arkham Horror content here on the Whisper in Darkness. I have a few irons in the fire that I'm working on, and hoping to push those out to you soon. So stay tuned for that.